they think about the dozens of roses that are given as gifts and the big trips that pretty much every one of my clients were taken on, fine dining and these resort level trips when they first met their co-parent, right? Within the first month even, or 3 months, they're already doing these things. But I think love bombing actually includes a lot of other red flags under it. One of the things is how quickly they want you to move in with them, how quickly they'll say, I love you. To say I love you to somebody after only 2 weeks or 3 weeks or a month is, it's not healthy, really. But, narcissists will do that. There's also the isolation starts under love bombing. Oh, well, now you have me, you only need me. And suddenly the friends and the family fall away. Oh, I love you so much that I want you to move to this state with me. And suddenly you have nobody, right? There's also, what's one of the big ones that was just in my head and now I can't get a hold of it, but the expediency is one of the biggest things. I'll tell you that right now. Oh, here's the one that people really fall for and they think is very romantic. And I did too. I'll tell you that right now, but turns out to be a major red flag is the staying up all night to talk, oh, we're in a 24-hour Denny's, we're in a 24-hour Starbucks. And he just stayed there and he just listened and we talked the whole night. It was so romantic. That's actually a red flag.
They're gathering information. They've got information. You're giving them. Hi, it's Tiffany Lorraine Galloway, certified high performance coach with another episode of the Resilient Mother podcast. This month, we're talking about being a resilient overcomer. And boy, do moms have to overcome all sorts of things. And the subject we're going to talk about today is actually child custody, which is something no mom really wants to face. But when you do, it's important to really know the right strategies and to educate yourself on the right moves to make. So with me today, I have Reneé Rodriguez, who's an expert at this, and she's going to give us her insights and tips. Reneé, thank you for being here. Please tell us more about you.
Thank you for having me, Tiffany. I appreciate the opportunity to be here and just kind of reach people who are going through this horrible time. So what I do is I'm a custody strategist. I head up a consultancy where we use the custody blueprint. The custody blueprint is a set of tools and templates that I created from my own custody battle that I then expanded. And we've been doing that for about a decade now with great success. I think, a big part of the work that we're doing is we're working with protective parents who are in a custody battle with an abusive co-parent to build their case, to help them partner with their lawyer and get the custody arrangement that's best for their kids, right? So we're basically taking a look at what everybody's coming to their case with, and we're saying, okay, here's what we know about family court. And so coming in with all of this is either too much or not the right kind of stuff. So we're really deep diving into the case prep that people are doing so that they can partner with their lawyer, so that they can be giving their lawyer the right stuff and ultimately actually be spending less with their lawyer because they're doing most of the work. And in that way, not just saving the money, but also presenting a much stronger case.
Because you'll know how to word what it is you want and what you're going for. And you also know what evidence you need to support what you're doing and what you're fighting for. I think, and emotion can't be a part of it. It has to be facts. It has to be things that are documented. It has to be instances or hospital visits and the thing about abuse too, is it's a lot broader than people realize. Domestic abuse can be defined as mental, emotional, or financial or physical. And so if you have proof of any of those things, but you have to know what stands up in court, and you're not going to know that on your own. And as much as you want to be applicable, like you want to work through divorce, if you're not getting a lawyer, you're just missing out on the opportunity. And it's not like there aren't resources for moms to get attorneys and lawyers. And there's lots of resources for moms with domestic violence. So in my experience, I've been through 2 divorces. The first one was kind of taken over for me by my father, and he filled out the paperwork and made me sign it. And I didn't even understand what I had signed, but it was a situation where they came and got me in the middle of the night and got me out of there. So it was just kind of the way it went. But later that backfired because it wasn't set up properly in a way that I didn't take on debt. And then the debt wasn't paid as promised with some arrangements with my parents and some other things that happened, family drama or whatnot. And I ended up having to declare bankruptcy for 10 years. because of that not being negotiated properly. And my dad's belief that no child support was ever going to come. Well, it did, but only for the months I still had my child, who I ended up putting up for adoption because I couldn't support them. Like, it was just not a win-win at all, because I was just in such a traumatized state not to make those kind of decisions, and I needed to get to safety. So that's one scenario. And then going into my second divorce, it's not like I planned it or anything, but I kind of saw it coming. And so I was a lot more strategic and thoughtful about my kids. I was more thoughtful about what I would need, what I would want, realizing that the more research I do, like you're talking about, the less time I spend with an attorney and can get right to the point, but also have a better chance at winning in court. Well, I got an attorney, my ex never did. It worked in my favor. It worked in my kids' favor. But later it had consequences because he thought things could change. And so there's been a lot of, she took advantage of me during the deep time and this and that. But really, usually it's the other way around. It's the woman who's getting taken advantage of. And so it was interesting to me to be on the other side of that. And then third case scenario, I'm in the middle of COVID, the courts are backed up and I'm trying to fight for custody for a child the dad doesn't want to act like he's part of the picture or has to be. And so that got delayed with him trying to avoid his responsibility for until it had to be like legally enforced. And so there's so many pieces of it. And then other situations where if it's across state lines, or if the dad is self-contracted and he works and lives in different states versus they can go after a wage. Like, it's not just you're going to get that signed by the judge. They still have to find the source. And there are still men who try to find a way to get out of that responsibility. Even if you get to the point you get custody settled, you get child support set up, you still have to keep yourself taking records, paying attention, asking the right questions, and deciding if you ever want that reevaluated or if it's better just to leave it alone. So those are
a testament to the uniqueness of each of our stories, of every protective mom's stories. And yet with that uniqueness comes the fact that we're also all dealing with the same type of person, right? We're dealing with many times a narcissist, but they think they're so special. They think they're unique when in reality they're cookie cutter. And so that element, in whatever way it appears, is shared amongst every protective parent who is a victim of abuse. But the stories within that, even though we all have the same story, we all have different stories as well.
Yeah.
Right. And it's interesting for you to be talking about, the agreement that comes quickly. I think so many protective parents, whether they're fleeing their abuser, whether they're filing for divorce, or if their abuser, it's not quite as frequent, but the abuser may be the one filing for divorce. There's a lot that happens fast. Mm-hmm. And then agreement needs to be hammered out almost right off the bat. And that's where I think people don't realize that what's temporary is actually what's going to become permanent.
Yes.
And so it's crucial that what's hammered out is not something that's pressured by your lawyer, even your own lawyer, which is so important to have if you can afford it, to really have that lawyer there. But even your own advocates, everyone is going to tell you it's just temporary, it's just temporary, it's just temporary. And what I find that I'm constantly saying to protective parents is, it's not though. It'll even say temporary on the top of it, but the minute that you agree to something, what you're doing is you're creating what the court sees as a status quo. And if that goes on for long enough, and for most courts that's at around 3 to 6 months, maybe 1 year, but you should say 6 months is safe. Once there's been some sort of an agreement, one sort of a situation, a parenting schedule, that's the most important thing for many parents, right? That's been going on for 6 months. It's not so temporary. And the number one temporary thing that parents are advised to do just to make it easier, because you just got divorced, because you just separated, and we need time to figure out where it all land, is 50-50. Mm-hmm. For the vast majority of children, especially when there's an abuser in the home, they have not experienced a 50-50 arrangement inside, right? The abusive parent, the narcissist, as it were, these are people who, they can't be bothered with the children. They don't know their favorite color, their best friend's name, their teacher's names, how well they sleep. They really don't know these things. They
Yeah.
just don't do a lot with these kids. Even when they come home from work, wherever they're coming from, they don't know a lot about these kids. And yet parents are told it's just temporary. Let's just do 50-50.
Yeah. Well, and
Another
it depends on what state you're into, because there are states that favor mom, there are states that push for 50-50, and then there's wide variations of all the different aspects of that. How the custody is decided, how the child support is decided. Is it a percent of incomes? Is it
yeah,
cost of living? Like, so you need to know that in the state that you're in as well, because it varies widely. And if you're going between states, now there are agreements between states to work together for certain
right.
things, but that's also going to change things as well. So there's a lot of moving pieces that you do need to completely think through. And I think the hardest thing is to be calm in all of that and to think straight. Like, I don't know, I'm an interesting person in that, like, I'm wired to get through the hard thing and then have the fallout of the emotions later.
Mm.
So it lets me
Mhm.
be level-headed, but I don't know if that's because I've been through a lot of things and I've just learned somehow that's my survival. But if you're a hot mess, like, lean on a friend, lean on a family member, like, find a resource so you can think clearly, because your kids desperately need you to in those crucial moments. And it is really hard when you have a lot of emotions flying around.
It also affects how you're appearing in court. If you are up against an abuser, they're likely to pull out the usual allegations. She's mentally unstable.
Mm.
She's alienating the children. She's the one who's the abuser. Her anxiety is causing the children to be anxious. And so the trauma that many of these moms are carrying with them comes into court with them as well, and makes it seem as if the abuser's narrative is true.
Yeah.
And so really what we're looking at is, how is it that we can overcome that, right?
Right.
Most of the people we work with are moms. There is a percentage of them who are abused dads, but it follows the statistics. 85% of abuse victims, and this is an older, it takes a while for the studies to catch up. So we're looking at stats that are, 5 years old at this point, but many people in the field would argue it's very much not at 85%. It's more like 95%. But let's go with the stats. Let's say 85% of abuse victims are female, right? Mm-hmm. So the majority of abused parents going into court happen to be moms. Mm-hmm. When we have the moms who are the abusers, which isn't the other 15%, by the way, I want to be clear on this. If 85% of abuse victims are female, out of the other 15%, 49% of those fathers have been abused by their male partner. They have a male perpetrator, and 48% of them have a female perpetrator. Wow. So we're looking at a very, very small percent of, abused parents who have been abused by a female. So if we sort of talk in those terms, then if we're talking about the fact that it is usually the mom who's being abused of these things, then walking in with that trauma, walking in with that emotion being worn on you is basically going to make their narrative seem true and really hurt the chances of the children being with the parent who was their primary caregiver and their primary attachment figure, if indeed it was the mom, which different statistic, but the majority of the time, even in this day and age, it is still usually the mom, right? So for me, it's really about it's not about mom or dad in the end. I want to be very frank about that. It really comes down to the children and what they are knowing and what they should be walking away with, right? If we have a family where the dad hung out with the kids on the weekend, then that should be what it looks like with divorce as well. The children should have the stability remaining. It's just that the statistic for supporting children is that the primary caregiver is usually the mom. So why then are we looking to upset the children's lives in order to go halfsies with the parents? We don't find that that's working well. And so for me personally, I think a lot of what we're trying to do with whether we're working with a mom or a dad, is to say, what are these parents used to? Talk to me about their home life. What proof do you have of their home life that we can show the court? It's hard to gather proof of a home life. When you're married with somebody, you're not gathering proof, right? So what you're really doing is you're looking for puzzle pieces.
Yeah.
the fact that you were the one making the appointments, the fact that when you look at the pediatrician's portal, they're talking about the fact that this is the parent who was there. They don't quite say it like that, but they'll basically say, mom was asking about this, dad was asking about that, whatever. And so that right there is proof that you were the one doing these things, the one who's being at the schools, the one who is volunteering. These are the things that show that involvement that you weren't documenting, but that documentation just rises out of emails and calendar appointments and school and medical portals.
Well, the idea is the children's lifestyle shouldn't be changed.
Agreed.
They're not the ones who caused the divorce. Technically, they're going to be collateral damage emotionally, no matter what you do. Tried to avoid that as much as possible. It's still there. Yeah. But even the wording, I remember with some of the attorneys I worked with, was that they should be able to maintain the lifestyle they're used to.
Right.
That's what the obligation is between both the parents. You should be able to work something out to do that. But age also is a huge factor in this. If you've got teenagers who are self-sufficient versus a child who needs childcare, or a baby for that matter, that totally changes the amount a mother is able to contribute outside of the home for these kids who are used to a mom who is home. And I don't think they think about that enough either. I was infuriated by a friend whose agreement made her give her child, who she was nursing, across state lines and almost lost her milk when they didn't give the child back. Makes no sense to me. No sense at all why that was allowed. The best thing for that child is to be with mom and nursing. And if you know all the dynamics of it, it doesn't make sense to me why certain people got any rights at all. But it was this whole idea of 50-50 is better. I don't know that's completely true. I do say, though, having kids who have a father in their life and don't have a father in their life, that the kids who have the father in their life do feel more secure in that, I would say. Now, my youngest is not used to anything more than mom, but it's starting to come up now. He's starting to notice as he goes to schools and different things that, oh, they have a dad. I guess that's, and so we're in counseling because I don't know how to navigate that. But did anyone think about that? I don't know. There's only so much you can do when someone does not want to take responsibility. and so that's why I'm grateful that the courts are there and the judges are there. But I don't know that there's this idea of fair, but there is this idea of what is the best thing for the child or children involved should be number one, not, okay, she was in this marriage, she helped you build your business, so she should get a little something, blah, blah, blah. And I don't mind that they've done away with the whole alimony for life thing. Like, alimony now is as long as you've been in the relationship. That actually makes sense in a lot of ways. But at the same time, if it's a mom who's never gotten her education, who's not worked, and is going to continue to take care of the kids, and then that all ends and she's not prepared for the workforce. I mean, there are other dynamics in there that the court doesn't even cover when it comes to custody that are going to be consequences down the road if you don't set yourself up right, thinking about how this is all going to eventually lead down the road. And that's hard when you're in it, because you're just right here in it and you're in the emotion and you're fighting, and I want my kids and I want my kids. And my brothers even had a custody battle where they were taking each other across different states, and it was before custody was settled. So it was whoever has the kid, and then they were tricking each other into having the kid and I'm just going to take her for a little bit, not coming back. Like, that was a nightmare to watch. So it does make sense. And that's to get that stable as soon as possible for the child, because that's scary to have to be like, who's at the door? Oh, we got to jump in the car and go away because custody isn't settled yet. Like, that's not cool either. So
it's interesting, to hear you, reference the fact that children do better when they have that father figure in their lives. There's some really interesting research that talks about the fact that it doesn't necessarily have to be, there are children where their father have died, or their father have abandoned them, or just absentee, or that the father is an abuser and shouldn't be there, or the mother, whatever it might be. But having that figure there, the research shows that it can be a father figure. Mm-hmm. It can also be family. There's such interesting stuff that they're looking at in terms of, we used to raise children in a village, and we still use that term, but it looks very different now. And so many women are asking, well, where's that village? Because I'm exhausted.
Yeah.
It used to be that if there was no, we're talking about fathers here, right? You're saying the father. It used to be that if there was no father, it was okay because there was grandpa and uncle and grandma and aunts, and just there were so many people raising a child that it has the same effect. It's basically the feeling of having more than that one person. And I want to be very clear, just having the one person does not make for children who are problematic, right? For people who grow up to not be good citizens. But when we look at the adverse child experiences, the ACEs study that was done with both Kaiser and the CDC, then we are looking at the fact that divorce is a big deal. And what is happening in the house after that is a big deal. And that's why when we're going to court, when unfortunately it's turned into a court battle instead of just some sort of an agreement, because there is someone who is abusive, when you have that abusive parent, then you do have to show the court that this child is better off, even if it means there's an isolated single parent, than if you force this 50-50 or any kind of a deeply shared custody arrangement where the child is living in a state of terror when they are in that abuser's home, right? Abandonment, neglect, terror. And that's the type of work that I'm doing. I'm working with that exact type of client who is dealing with a co-parent who is causing more problems than helping more. And I feel like there's this feeling where it's kind of like, well, let's get rid of the dads, let's get rid of the other parent. It's kind of like, heck no, but let's get rid of the abuser. I'm for that.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
That's what I'm for. And so if it's, sure, statistics show that it's mostly, going to be male, but that's just what it is. In reality, what we're really looking at is, what does this child need? The world has shown us that these are the statistics, that this is the reality, fine. But every time we're working with a client, we are looking at that situation and that child and what kind of abuse we've got in the other household. Sometimes there can be remediation. And if there's not full remediation, then we can ask the court to help that abusive parent to remediate their home or the living situation or the childcare situation or something to help them at least have less adverse experiences for these children in their household. We can't cure narcissists of being narcissists. The scientists are kind of like, that's not something that we can do at this time, but there are things we can do to at least make it easier for our children. And that's part of what we'll sometimes do, is we'll help a parent say, all right, well, if we know that the Constitution affords parents the rights to have access to their children almost no matter what, because it is a constitutional right. So you must accept that your co-parent is going to have some time with your child. Let us propose to the court what that kind of time can look like and what needs to happen for the children to be not just physically safe, but also mentally safe in the other household, right? Absolutely. And that's really part of what needs to be happening when it comes to strategy.
So the minute a mom realizes there's going to be a custody battle, what would your advice be to her to gear up to be resilient for what she's about to face?
Documentation. I think it's, and there's this, there was recently, it went away real quick, and I'll tell you why. There was a trend on the internet, on social media, that type of thing, where, protective parents were talking about just being exhausted, being told to document every little thing. And it felt ridiculous, and it was confusing to know, well, what am I supposed to be documenting? What am I not supposed to be documenting? So there were people who would come on and say, don't document everything. You shouldn't. It's ridiculous to document everything. And then what we started seeing is parents would come in and they would say, now he's accusing me of this, or now this came up, and we'd be all kind of like, well, don't, just let's look at the proof so that we know how to present it to the court. It's kind of like, well, I didn't really document. I got tired of documenting. I felt like I didn't want to, blah, blah. It's kind of like, then we've got nothing. We've got he said, she said, and the more he said, she said you bring in, the less you're just not going to do as well. So we do tell our clients to document absolutely everything as much as they can before they leave, as soon as they think that they're going to leave, as soon as they recognize that they're suffering a special kind of cruelty that is not normal. And we tell them, we want you to document everything. We want you to try to get a hold of everything that you can, that you have a right to have, whatever paperwork you need to have, if you can, before you leave, you better get it, because the amount of stuff that disappears is crazy. The amount of forgeries that are out there, it's really difficult to overcome it. You would think you could just go in and say, well, this is obviously this. It's actually more difficult than you think. So get paperwork, get the deeds, get the mortgage paperwork, get the financial paperwork, get the balances, the historical balances, as soon as you can, because once you leave, you get cut off from this information. And then you don't know what kind of information the court is then going to see. But then after you leave, you are documenting all of the transitions. So whenever you're meeting to have the children go to parenting time to the other parent, as long, and let me say this, let me pause and say this. As long as it is legal in your state to do so, you should be recording these things for sure.
Yes. And that's
sure.
I have a friend, word of caution there. You don't record things in bathrooms. That can be a big
no. And really what you're doing is I'll tell you, the easiest thing you're going to do is you're going to take your state or your province and you're going to, let's say it's Wyoming. So you're going to say Wyoming recording laws. And that is all you need to put into your search engine. And it's going to come back and it's going to say one of three things. It's either going to say you're a one-party consent state, two-party consent, or all-party consent. Two-party consent and all-party consent are kind of the same. They're a little bit different and it kind of varies by state or province, but it doesn't really matter. As long as it's two-party consent or all-party consent, you cannot record without everyone's agreement who is part of the conversation. All right. One-party consent means, which I just started to hint, there has to be a conversation that you are part of. You are the one party who is giving consent in the conversation that you are in. So you must be part of that conversation. You cannot record your children on phone calls with your co-parent. You cannot record your co-parent doing something if you're not part of the conversation. So being at an exchange, you're part of the conversation. You say hi, you say bye, you're good. That's a conversation, right? Hey, oh, do you have their backpack? Whatever. Many of these sort of exchanges or transitions is what I prefer to call them. It's so hard for the parents to be civil that it really is just hello and goodbye. And that's it. If that's being part of the conversation. So you can record that. If you're just having a conversation with your children and you happen to be recording that, but then your ex says something or starts something, that's, you're the one party who is giving consent. You should always check with your lawyer on this thing, of course, but these recordings have turned out to be so helpful in court. The problem, of course, is the amount of recordings that people have. So the biggest tip I have for people is that you're really only going to be using 1, 2, maybe 3 recordings of any kind, unless you are recording physical abuse. If you have captured physical abuse, which is very difficult to do, then you use as many of those recordings as you've got. Other than that, you'll have hundreds upon hundreds of recordings. At this point, our clients have thousands. But what we recommend people do is just give a particular title to anything where you've captured something you think might be useful that you'd like to share with your, custody coach or your lawyer. And everything else, just make sure that the date that you took it is in the title, right? And you're just going to leave it alone. You're going to leave it alone. A lot of our clients will say, well, I ran out of space, so I deleted a whole bunch of stuff. And then it's kind of like, well, except that now we're discovering in interrogatories that your co-parent is accusing you of picking up a rock and throwing it at his car on August 18th of 2023. Did you delete that? Yeah, because that's old and was taking up too much storage space. Well, now you have no proof that all you did was arrive and say hi and goodbye, got in your car. We hear your car doors shut. We hear the ignition. We hear your turn signal and you driving. Now you have no proof that it didn't happen, right? So sometimes these things are just going to sit there. And so we recommend that people just get Dropbox and keep loading the stuff up in there. Just get a terabyte or so. People are paying their lawyer, $400, $500, $600 an hour. Then you can definitely pay, $20 a month to Dropbox to hold on to all of that stuff in case you need to go back and have that evidence.
Yeah. And I think my second divorce, the thing that I knew was documentation. The other thing that I knew was to get the finances in order right away. And luckily I was in charge of the finances because I'd heard horror stories of someone being vindictive and running up the credit cards and whatnot. And I was like, but how's that affect the kids? Then when we get to court, his finances are a mess. That means mine are too. Like, how does that? So I wanted to avoid all of that. And we were working with the counselor for many years. So it was kind of a gradual burn when it hit the final turning point when we realized it was over. And so I guess I got to be a little calmer going into it than most people do, but we did a separation agreement.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm really glad we did, because it set in like a cadence already for who was going to be with who, when, and it just laid out some basic things. We used a template that was in the back of a book that was about working out if you were going to divorce or not. So I'm sure there's something out there, but it was enough because it had both of our signatures on it. That gave us a framework when we went into divorce to have a few things settled already. But it was just kind of, it made a little bit of a smoother transition for the kids, really, more than anything. And then it was also clear for them to go, Mommy and I are separated right now. We're going to see if we can work this out or not. And then they knew if we couldn't work it out, because there was a date and everything attached to, okay, we're going to do this for 3 months. We're going to see if we can work things out or not. And at the end of 3 months, we're going to decide, what the next step is. That really helped. But then I also started separating all the accounts, all the credit cards, paying off the debt, making sure the car was in my name. We had a house we couldn't afford at the time. So what was going to happen with that? Like, I got those things in place before we got to the real legal part of it, just so that, motherhood. Okay.
Yeah.
So through the whole process, I think the biggest thing is somehow emotionally removing yourself from all the, I'm not a family anymore, I'm stepping into single motherhood and all these things, and just being a little bit logical about it. And that's so much easier if you have someone to guide you who's been there, who's done that. One of my attorneys, I didn't even find out till later, the judge said I couldn't work with that attorney anymore because he hadn't fought enough for me. And there's been consequences for some of those things. One of the big things that caught me off guard is that some things can be set as a percentage.
Yeah.
And if they're set as a percentage and you don't know, you're like, oh, okay, good. That says a percentage. That'll be fine. Especially if it's like a large percentage for them and a low percentage for you. You think it's taken care of. But then you go to find out, to enforce it, it has to be a dollar amount. And the only reason it was set as a percentage is because the cost of that varies over time. So I'm talking about childcare, medical. Right. There are some aspects that's not cut and dry. This is his wage. This is the cost of living. And that'll vary by state to state too. Some states are better at making sure mom has custody. Mom is the primary caregiver. Some fight for 50-50 custody. Some will fight for it to be in between states. And so there's all of those dynamics that you need to think about and take into account. And overall, what's realistic too? I mean, you as a single mom are going to have to rebuild your life. You may not be able to be the at-home mom the whole time. And you may, I mean, look at inflation and different things. Like right now, nobody saw some of those things coming. So, there are moms that are in 2 one-bedroom apartments, making it work, sleeping on the couch right now, just so that they know their kid is taken care of. And those arrangements were made before all of this happened, but it may not be worth going back to court to mess up with it right now. And so there's that too. Is it worth going back to court to fix this? Is it not worth going back to court to fix that? So when that gets signed by the judge, it better be an attorney who fought for you and really got you everything that you and your child needs. Mm-hmm. And you also need to make sure that the attorney is not biased towards you if you're a single parent, if you're an abandoned parent, if they're biased in a divorce. And you may not know that right away. Maybe somebody referred you to them, or you saw there was a good review for them, but really do your research on who your attorneys are. And realize it's going to vary from state to state too, because some states, there aren't a lot of cases, so attorneys will drag them out. And they'll tell you, that's just how it is. This is just how we do it. And then other states get enough cases that they know that they're better off being efficient and effective and right to the point, and they're happy to get your case moving forward. But it's really what you're going to make out of it by educating yourself, because it's their job. Their job is by the hour. So depending on if their goal is to have lots of cases versus they're going to just take whatever money they can get from you, or you don't have that much money to work with in the first place, there is that responsibility on you. So it's not like you get an attorney and you just don't just hand it over and don't just trust, because they're most likely going to miss something that was important to you.
My preference is for our clients to act as if they are running the case themselves, to put together their case materials in a way so that when they have put everything together, then they can go to the lawyer and show the lawyer what they've got. One of the reasons that many lawyers are kind of flying blind in many ways, that they're just going off of what they know. And then they have to deal with their usual way of doing things, what someone called their bag of tricks, for example, right? The more that you are able to efficiently give to your lawyer, meaning you're not giving them everything. By more, I don't mean you're giving them everything, but rather that you're putting it together in a particular way, the better you can put together your own case and hand it over to the lawyer, and then the two of you discuss it. It actually greatly increases your chances of getting the custody arrangement that's best for your children. The thing I do just want to make sure that, we do clarify is that while there are some differences, and there are some states where it's like the state as a whole across the board generally has this going on. But for most states, it really comes down to the jurisdiction you're in as to whether or not that is going to be a jurisdiction that prefers 50-50 versus wants to see if the children should be with mom or the children should be with dad. So really what you're looking at is, hey, what is going on with this judge when you're working with your lawyer? What do you know about this judge? You can also ask around, for example, with divorced women's groups, divorced dads groups, whatever it might be, to say, what are these judges like? But I think when we're asking those questions, it's very easy to listen to the people who are talking about, oh, the best judge in the world, or, oh, this person is terrible. Make sure you don't get that lawyer. Make sure you don't get this, that, the other thing. I think it's important to open up DMs with these people and ask some very real questions, because their case may sound exactly like yours, but then almost everyone, when you start really asking questions, you realize you have a different type of case. So I think it is about knowledge. I think it is about getting opinions out there, but you want to get a general sense of your jurisdiction, right? Who all is under that jurisdiction. For example, if you live in Brooklyn, New York, it's going to be a Kings County jurisdiction, and Brooklyn is humongous, and yet Kings County is basically the courthouse for that, right? That's then your jurisdiction. So it's not necessarily a county or a town or anything like that, although it may be. You just have to figure out what defines a jurisdiction, what does your courthouse cover? So then what is it like in your courthouse? So what are the philosophies around that? And then the other thing I wanted to bring up is that when you are making, I love that you're talking about right out the gate, whatever you start out with, is so key. And I think part of what you're talking about is the fact that it's actually going to save you a lot of money as well as heartache if you have some things settled before you really start to go through court, or at least through the mediators, that type of thing. Is one of the top things I want people to start with, even if it's, many times people will say, well, it's March, who cares? I really think it's important to have a holiday schedule pinned down almost right off the bat. It depends. Now, the problem with the holiday schedule is that a lot of times there's just this careless sort of, oh, let's just alternate, let's just do this, let's just do that. And I think it's really important to be thoughtful about something. Here again, once you come up with a holiday schedule, it's something that is probably going to be followed. It's the easiest one to change, but not by much. But this actually creates an incredible amount of angst and wasted dollars. If you don't solve this, this is one single thing that ends up going to court again and again and again. And sometimes what I see, and it may not be because they're trying to line their pockets with money, it may be because that's just the way it's done in your jurisdiction. You become a part of this system where you're back in court for every single holiday, including 4th of July and Memorial Day and every 3-day weekend in the world. And now suddenly these holidays are costing you tens of thousands of dollars because you didn't sit down and figure out some sort of a holiday schedule that you can go by until you get to the next one, to the final one. Again, and I want to be clear, temporary schedules, temporary plans usually become permanent, but the holiday schedule is usually the one that allows it to be a little bit more malleable. But you have to try things out first. So save your money and get that holiday schedule as part of the agreement that you are putting together right out the gate.
And those
there
are
may be some
that you might miss if you're just in the emotion of it and you just don't know. You haven't been through it before. You don't know what things to think about. Was, I think, the most shocking moment in my divorce was to realize I'm only gonna have every other Christmas with my girls. Yeah. Have every other. I mean, it just it hurt my heart, but that's just the reality of divorce. But it was interesting in Utah. Utah has a whole parenting plan that you have to start with. And I think it's been a smart move for the state because it has holidays and all the things you don't think about in there. I mean, it's thick. And so it's always fun. Like, I need your divorce paperwork. And I'm like, how much of it do you really need? But it at least gave the outline for, oh, I hadn't thought about that. Or I hadn't thought about those kind of assets to split. Or, I have my own life insurance versus he has his, or beyond the savings, beyond the checking, who has what car, are you both on it? Are you both on this? Are you both on that? And the kids' inheritance, is there things in place for that? And how are they going to get that? Is dad going to hold them? Is mom going to hold them? Those kind of things. Like, my girls had some jewelry from some trips we did with them when they were little. Are they in dad's safe? Is mom holding those till they're older? And there are just so many things, but that template from the state was already there. So I think if you can find someone who has that, if your state doesn't already have that, that was kind of an advantage when I was in a different state. And in Idaho, it was not nearly as detailed at all. So there was a lot of room for missing things or for it to be more generalized. And so in that case, I think it could become more of how detailed you wanted it to be. Yeah. But the more that you can hit all of those details, you are going to save time, you are going to save money, and you'll be right there up front. And so it's intense emotionally. It's intense. It takes some resilience, and it just takes a lot of thought and being willing to make that an investment up front with your time, your money, and your energy to set yourself up for success and your kids up for success in the future, and less fighting, and less, as much as you can. You're going to get someone who is going to fight everything no matter how well you do. I'm sure you've seen those cases. They just want to manipulate, control. They don't want to lose control. They act like they want the kids, but it's really about hurting the other person. And so there's also that. Do the best that you can to protect your kids and fight for your kids. And then you have to leave it that you did all that you could do. But at least here, I'm hoping that a mom's hearing this and learning the steps she could take to know, well, I did all that I could do. And because then you can go to sleep at night knowing that you did your best. And if you need to go at it again, here are the right resources and the right things to do. And then sometimes it's just not worth going back and fixing. Yep. Sometimes you just got to make do with how it is and learn and move forward and find a different way to adapt if you can.
I think too, one of the things that I want to comment on when it comes to those holiday schedules is that if you are in a state or province where basically they're saying, look, if you guys can't decide, this is what you follow. I'm glad that you brought up the fact that sometimes it's got nothing except odd and even and mom and dad, right? If you walk away, if you're in some sort of and it tends to happen, by the way, I see this happen a lot in just these hearings. So it happens fast. The judge says, just follow the schedule. But I think it's important to instruct your lawyer that if that happens, or if you're going pro se, meaning self-represented, that you do yourself, you say, do you mind if we nail down start and end times on this so that we don't have this heartache, so that we're not back where we're at? Because the fighting that happens around these holidays, and I think most of these abusers really enjoy the fighting because they want that sabotage. Mm-hmm. They want to be able to control. They want to be able to ruin the holidays because it's not something that they can truly, completely enjoy themselves. So they want to make sure that nobody does. Right. It's also punishment and vendetta and that type of control. And so you do want to get those details in there so that you're not fighting and miserable beyond it.
Yeah. And it may not just be holidays. It could be birthdays. It could be anniversaries. It could be something. They have a tendency to attach it to something that means something to you, and that is very personal. And I think that's the tricky thing too, when you're going through divorce, and I'm learning this more and more as I research narcissist abuse, you don't want to give them very much information to work with.
No.
You want to go silent as much as you possibly can. So they don't know what your next move is, and they don't have anything to make bullets with. The more you talk, the more you spew, the more you get emotional, or you hope it goes back to the way it was, or you think you're giving them like your heart, your authenticity that was there in the beginning. Oh no, any story you've given them, any mistake you've made, anything that meant anything to you, that all gives them fuel to manipulate and to take advantage of you or to just hurt you. Know your pain points, know what's going to set you off in court, know what's going to set you off and feed that she's the crazy one. What are you talking about? Yeah. I'm a perfect parent, or, I mean, it is that extreme. And then other times it's just, they're very charismatic. They're very charming so people take sides thinking they know the whole story, and they just weren't there. They don't know the other side of that person either. And not everyone's perfect. I know my marriage, we tried. We really tried. I know we did everything we could to try to make it work, and we love our kids. And then the other situation, I felt like I was completely blindsided, and I didn't see what I was in until it was too late. And then it was, oh, this is what I'm dealing with now. And I just knew what to do. And I am glad that somebody pointed out, you just need to go silent. Don't say anything. Don't let anybody know what you're going to do. Don't share what you're going to do. I didn't even know what I was going to do, honestly, but it ended up in the end being the very best thing, that advice I was given in all of it, because there was no way for anyone to know what I was or wasn't going to do, or what I'd worked out with my attorney, or what knowledge I had given myself, what strategies I had in place financially or emotionally to just be the rock that my kids needed and to be ready to face however things turned out. Because it took, I don't know, between everything being backed up during COVID, getting stuff in court and getting it signed took longer than it needed to. And then it was like 2 years for some stuff to get put into place because things were being avoided and not solidified, and things were backed up. So it took a while. And so that's the other thing too, is it may not go as quickly as you hope either. I know I have a few friends without kids with a narcissist who's divorcing, and it's years because they're not allowing the divorce to happen. Yeah. And so that's a whole different thing. And put kids on top of that, that's a really unhealthy situation that needs resolved, which is why the courts want to move to something for the kids more than anything. And if you can keep them in mind, and if your significant other abusers, that's a wild card there. But the thing that always helped when we were settling things was we both loved our kids enough to go, what's going to be best for the kids? And then we could agree. But if it was about me, or it was about him, or it was about our relationship, that was just asking for sabotage and agreeing to something. So it was just better to agree to disagree or compromise on a few things there. But when it came to the kids, if you're both parents who just realize this doesn't work for whatever reason that it is, and I don't speak lightly, I think traditional families are beautiful, and I would have loved for things to have worked out differently, but it was obvious the marriage was dead, and it was worse to stay together than it was to part. Then you have to face the music of that.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because 95% of divorcing parents don't end up in court. So it's unfortunate that when you end up in court, it's probably going to be difficult. But yeah, the ideal is to just sit it down, figure it out, and do what's best for the kids.
Yeah. And that may mean accepting you kind of have to set each other up for success. He's got to be able to support himself, and yes, he needs to help with you, but you both are still in charge of those kids the best that you can do. If you are going to divorce too, I think it's important. The one mistake I think we made that we maybe should have thought through a little bit, we had to get divorced because we had bought a house we couldn't afford. Was part of it, among many other things, that the time frame became short that we had to deal with to not become in financial ruin. But if we hadn't had to face that, I would have really made sure that the mom has some form of education or a way of creating income before the divorce. Don't leave her with the kids at home and think she's somehow going to be able to find that. And I think the other thing too is there's inflation, there's different things. And when they get a new spouse or whatnot, what's fair and everything in a third party, boy, did things change. But really, if you have a new family and you have your kids, if you're a good parent, you're going to make sure both are being sustained in the lifestyle. You're not going to favor one over the other.
Yeah.
If they're your kids and you love them, you're going to make sure that their needs are met. And I think that's where some men get into trouble too, is, well, I think in general in divorce, I'm going to just go start a new family and leave. What's that do to the kids? I'm happy for the states to fight more for the kids for that reason, because sometimes the parents aren't thinking completely clearly. They may be Twitter-pated in the new relationship by the time the divorce happens or something, and they think it's a fresh slate. It really isn't. and so there's set yourself up for success if you know this is coming, not just for the kids, but if you can be cordial enough, set each other up for success so that you don't really have to deal with each other at all afterward, because you've thought through how you're both going to get there in the future and get the kids all the way to 18, not just this moment right now. Because I think you just think right now versus, oh, what happens when they're 18 or high school, or they need a car, or, they need more, or what they could do for college. Like, that doesn't change. The path for them to be successful should still be set up for them. And if you don't do that, you're just hurting the kids. If you don't set the mom up for support and success, if you sabotage the father financially or whatever out of jealousy, revenge, vindictiveness, whatever, he cheated, like, you're just hurting the kids. If you can come back to the kids, I think it's just going to be better overall. So
I wish that was, in with the niche that I'm working in, unfortunately, there's always a battle where there's one parent trying to protect them and one parent trying to control everyone. So it's difficult.
How common is it? Is it been more common over the years?
Well, you know what? That's an interesting question. I realize in terms of the statistics, because I think I just mentioned that 95% of divorcing parents just figuring it out, right? Out of the 5% that obviously that number is still so astoundingly high that the courts are still inundated. 75% of them have an abuser among them. And so it's not actually overly common, but then once you discover what has happened to you, once you discover that you are in an abusive relationship, your awareness increases. And so you start to see it more. That can make it feel like it's all over the place, but in reality, it is that awareness. It is now seeing things for what they really are. So it can feel like it's the larger amount of divorcing parents, but in reality, it's not. It's almost this microcosm, as it were, of people who then enter into a special kind of, hellscape, quite frankly. Yeah.
Yeah. How often, I'm curious, because people are divorced multiple times, it seems, anymore these days, like myself. Yeah. Never saw that coming. How often do you come across it's a second or divorce, or it's not the first divorce that someone's in, and they're repeating the pattern because they picked a similar partner and they didn't realize it?
Well, I think there's two questions you sort of asked me, because this is an interesting question you're asking, because usually what I'm seeing is that there's gender differences here. There really are, where we will see the father will be on his second or third divorce, maybe even his fourth, but usually just a second or third. And they've got a pretty good idea of what they're walking into, so they're far better prepared. Usually the moms that we're working with, this is their first marriage. Sometimes we do have some in their second marriage. And for those moms, interestingly enough, the majority of them, that second marriage turned out to be abusive, but the first one wasn't. So we're not really seeing repeated patterns for people when it comes to marriages. Where we see the repeated patterns, probably on both sides, is just in the types of people that they talk about, that they have dated, that they have experienced before, right? And that really does make sense. I mean, when you have things that you don't realize that you haven't dealt with, the way you were raised, your own parents, there's as they say, ancestral trauma, where it's like you're learning from your parents who are learning from their parents, and so on and so on, then that kind of thing is something that you carry with you. We know that narcissists tend to be attracted to people who are vulnerable, but also successful, that often happens, right? And so that pattern can be repeated if that vulnerability is something that lacks boundaries. It's okay to be vulnerable. It's beautiful to be vulnerable, I think, right? But when it lacks boundaries and it lacks recognition, then it gets tricky. And I do want to say that when I say lacking recognition, I'm not trying to blame the victim at all, because the recognition I'm talking about is more in the red flag stage, which is usually the red flags don't normally show up heavily until they've got you. You know, you are living with them, you've
Or
said
they've got you. Yeah.
or they think they've got you, because when you first meet them, narcissists are very well practiced in appearing to be your soulmate. They'll even use that kind of language, right? And it's a great setup, because we grow up believing that there's somebody out there like your soulmate and your one and your person.
Only going to fix everything. Yeah.
And so if somebody's capitalizing on that and saying all the right things and, you know, appearing to be a certain way, they can hold that mask. It's very well practiced. Their childhood injury, their trauma is so severe that they've had to become well practiced at this since childhood. So they have years, decades on top of having that mask, having that, you know, sheep's clothing, as it were, to be able to convince you that they're just really, really wonderful people. There's covert and there's overt. I like to sometimes use shows, except people don't watch the shows, but there's a show where we have the perfect covert narcissist, and that I love this show. It's not the type of show I normally watch, because it's a very violent show, and I don't normally watch very violent shows, but there's a show called Dexter, where they've done an interesting thing. And what they've done is that the character of Dexter actually narrates his mind. Like, you can hear him in first person saying what his real thoughts are, and then the way he presents himself. And that's an excellent way. It's an excellent demonstration of how a covert narcissist can convince. Whereas if you're looking for an overt narcissist and you want to watch the American or the English version of The Office, the office manager in the American version has Steve Carell playing it. That is just covert. That's overt narcissism. It's all over the place.
Obvious, yeah.
but this is an overt. Here's where it's such a great example of narcissist. It's an overt narcissist who is in a power position.
Oh yeah.
And so you really get to watch how they're able to get away with these things. And it's John
powerful
money in the office.
Or career, or they have a lot of money. They've had to do something to compensate in their life to feel of value, even their appearance, and those kind of things. And so it's interesting to see a narcissist get older who's used to using their appearance, because they lose
it's
their mind.
Very interesting. It's forever, right?
Yeah. Or they lose their position or their job over something that, they're being questioned about it or whatnot. Yeah, it's a little scary, really. But as I'm listening to you, I'm going back and seeing the red flags I missed when I was very vulnerable. And what are like the biggest red flags that people miss as you're talking about this? Because I think that's what probably some women are thinking. They're like, what are those red flags?
Probably the biggest ones are the things that would fall under love bombing. I think when people who have heard the term love bombing before hear it, they think about the dozens of roses that are given as gifts and the big trips that pretty much every one of my clients were taken on, fine dining and these resort level trips when they first met their co-parent, right? Within the first month, even, or 3 months, they're already doing these things. But I think love bombing actually includes a lot of other red flags under it. One of the things is how quickly they want you to move in with them, how quickly they'll say, I love you. To say I love you to somebody after only 2 weeks or 3 weeks or a month is, it's not healthy, really. But, narcissists will do that. There's also the isolation starts under love bombing. Oh, well, now you have me, you only need me. And suddenly the friends and the family fall away. Oh, I love you so much that I want you to move to this state with me. And suddenly you have nobody, right? There's also, what's one of the big ones that was just in my head and now I can't get a hold of it, but it's this the expediency is one of the biggest things. I'll tell you that right now. Oh, here's the one that people really fall for and they think is very romantic. And I did too. I'll tell you that right now. But turns out to be a major red flag is the staying up all night to talk. Oh, we're in a 24-hour Denny's. We're in a 24-hour Starbucks. And he just stayed there and he just listened. And we talked the whole night. It was so romantic. That's actually a red flag.
They're gathering information. They've
got information.
You're giving them the
attention. And it's also one of the things that later could become abuse, which is one of the abuse tactics we see is when they get particularly severe, is that they won't let their victim sleep, whether it's a child or an adult. They will not let them sleep. And we know as a DV advocate, one of the things that I really learned a lot about in getting certified a lot. Mm-hmm. And one of the most interesting things was how they use disruption of sleep as power. You're just at your weakest state. All you want to do is sleep, and they're terrorizing you. And that is actually usually when they tend to start yelling and raising their voice, which rattles the body so much that when are you even going to fall back sleeping when they decide they're done with you, right? And so there are these types of red flags. Silent treatment, that's abuse, straight up. The minute that they've erased you and you're not worth talking to, you got to get out. Mm-hmm. You got to get out, right? Another one is just if you're walking on eggshells, if you don't know when they're going to be angry, you got to get out. And I think, and I want to talk about these red flags because it's all very well and good for me to say this when I've been through. It's all very well and good for you to say. It's all very well and good for all of us to say, oh, those were red flags. I don't think anybody should feel stupid about it because it's not normal. These red flags are not normal. And so we are trusting human beings. They usually like to go to empaths and take advantage of empaths because empaths are going to see the best in people. And so many of the moms we work with, and I can say this for myself as well, it's like what they end up saying when we identify, oh, that was a red flag, that was abuse, they're all kind of like, I can't believe that was abuse. It's kind of like, yeah, I mean, look it up, talk to any DV advocate. That's absolutely, talk to a psychologist, it's abuse. Yeah. And there's a little bit of shame about why didn't I see it? But what you're doing in the relationship is you have to normalize it because it's so cruel and so weird and so bizarre that that's when we start helping them out by saying, well, things were tough at work. Well, they just got an argument with their brother. Well, the big bill came in. Well, this, well, that. And so we find these reasons to normalize it because we're good people. Right. And we're trying to say they're just going through a hard time. And that's why they're being mean or
and it's going to feel a little like trying to make sense of chaos. Because it's that first 90 days, the chemicals kicking in, someone who's vulnerable, just divorced. You're a target, people. If you are a newly divorced woman and you're a little bit pretty and maybe your kids, kids or no kids, I wish somebody would have said, watch out. Somebody knows you're newly divorced. If they know you got money in the divorce, watch out. Someone will target you. And so watch your back. I did not learn that until it was too late for sure. And then I ended up in some single groups too that I didn't know were like swingers. And I didn't even know what that meant at the time and different things. And I was like, so be careful what your group becomes when you become single too, I would say, because that's where they go prowling a little bit. They're looking for someone who is just had a death or a divorce or lost the job, or like you're in a state where you want someone to deeply come in and be intimate with you, but their version of intimacy is not what it appears to be. But you don't know it until they've gotten into you, and then they start creating chaos in you, and you're trying to make sense of what it should. It's never going to make sense. It's chaos. That's how they live. They live on creating chaos, setting you off balance, making you emotionally vulnerable. And I have family members who are, and it's been so interesting to learn what to say and not to say, how to not give an emotionally charged response, and to be calm and to put it back on them, and in a way that there isn't a response. For example, that doesn't work for me. It's not personal, doesn't give any details, ends the conversation. That doesn't work for me. They can't take anything with that. They can't do anything with that.
Yeah.
Another one would be, I'm sure from your point of view, that's how it is. I can see how you see it that way. It's enough to acknowledge what they said, but then not feed anything. And there are some great YouTube videos with different people that are experts on this, but like some of that, even going into divorce, if you know some of those ways to talk, then because it's one thing to just be silent. At
Yeah.
some point, you're going to have to talk, but
Yeah.
it's really important to know how to engage because then now, if you know these red flags and you're listening to this, you can also test the waters with these people too to set off red flags. So like I tell my girls who've had to be through everything with me, here's some things you need to do. You need to test the guy out. You fall in love. Yeah, it feels good. Yeah, he's next to you. Okay, test him out. Is he financially responsible? How does he treat his mother? How does he treat his brother and his families? What do his coworkers say about him? Like, I think that's the key too. I noticed is that you don't know what the family thinks, or they're in a transition where they're in reform or something like that. And everyone's hoping they reform or they get out of the situation or things are going to be better. Or I'm coming back to activity in the church, I promise. Or, like there's always, and the family really wants them to be what they're not, sadly. And so they'll enable what's going on. So you need to test those dynamics outside of just you, because if there's an unhealthy pattern in the whole family, then you'll be able to see it and be able to step back and not get pulled into it. Because like the family dynamics with my family too is like I'm trying to stay out of the circus in a sense, but the circus is still going on, right? And so it becomes this weird thing with divorce too. Like that's one thing is kind of nice, it's cut and dry, like you're not a part of it anymore, but you do get pulled in once in a while when your kids get pulled in. So knowing how to navigate that, I think is just important and something else to look into.
I think it's also interesting to see how they treat service people when they haven't gotten there. So their reaction when the meal that came out was wrong, or there weren't ketchup packets, or they have to wait, right? I think it's important to observe that kind of stuff. But again, I would argue that it's difficult for people who are empaths because they try to find reasons for it. One of the things I like to have our parents go through with their teens as they're dating is loveisrespect.org. Which is an excellent, it doesn't so much focus on the bad things so much as talk about this is what love looks like.
Yeah.
Right. And nobody's really saying that, we're defining love by rom-coms, which rom-coms are actually, if you look at them, they're full of red flags. Right. But it's like, romance novels or anything like that, where they talk about the fact that the plots in most of these things are really about fixing somebody who's rough around the edges. And it's kind of like, you don't have to be around somebody who's rough around the edges. They don't have to be perfect. Nobody is, as you said earlier. But if you're seeing things, instead of trying to explain them away, as you're saying, you're looking a little deeper, you're observing a little more. And for the moment, maybe you're putting pause on how deeply you're emotionally investing until you can find what's really going on behind some of these strange behaviors. I think that the problem with women is that women, by and large, are raised as people pleasers. And so it's very easy to just keep moving ahead. It's very easy to feel bad if you are not giving somebody the benefit of the doubt. But I think you can give the benefit of the doubt at the same time that you are just slowing down a bit, right? And so that's kind of what we want to teach our kids, right?
Yeah. Can you say that website one more time?
Loveisrespect.org.
Love that. I definitely want to use that resource because I think I hear women either realize I don't know what love is if they've been through a lot of abuse. Yeah. I feel like I'm still learning what that definition is because so much of what I experienced was conditional love. And then two, like they lost themselves in the relationship. By the time they got through the divorce, they got through protecting the kids. They don't even recognize themselves anymore.
No, a shadow of themselves.
And it's really interesting if you then you go to rebuild. And you really have to try to do it from a place where not always everyone's going to know who you were before. Not everyone's going to know what you were like before this abuse happened.
Yeah.
or that, you had it together. You had a full ride scholarship, or you had a great job, or you had things that you
Yeah.
lost
Very common. Yeah.
because you were so sabotaged. So you were successful. And then the narcissist takes a lot of pleasure in how they completely annihilated your success or something very important to you. And it's so hard to explain to people unless you've been through it. I wish you knew who I was before. No, this was a part of my life before. I did have this. Like, it's almost maddening sometimes because you try to get back to that, but you're forever changed. And hopefully
Yeah.
you can be forever changed in the end in a good way. But
Yeah.
as a mom, I think too, like, feel free to go back to those things that maybe you lost, maybe that hobby that you had, or that career that you had, or whatever it was that you lost in the process. I feel like you have the right to believe you can get back to it and be a good example to your kids of, yeah, we've been through this rough patch together and this is not a safe situation. We now know. So hopefully you're better prepared for it, but we make mistakes. People are not perfect. And we fall for the red flags. We have rose-colored glasses. We have hopes. We have dreams. But we go on. We fall down and we get up again, and we learn what resilience is. And each step along the way, as long as we don't allow ourselves to become hard and heartless or like our abusers, then we win, because they have no more power over us and they have no control over us. And we didn't truly lose ourselves. Maybe we actually found ourselves, and we found out we were stronger than we ever knew we could or had to be. And in the end, it can be what we make of it, not what they think they did.
100%.
Well, I've absolutely loved our conversation. I've kept you a whole hour. So
It's a good conversation.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I love these ones where like we can't stop because we're just like, ooh. So I thank you so much. It's so insightful. I love some of the perspectives you had and some of the insights, because you're not just someone who's doing this, like you've been through it too. So you really can understand and be in there with someone, us percent that get to experience this, that allows us to be, I don't know, I was so judgmental before when I was married, to anyone who was a divorced mom, to anyone who was a single mom, to anyone who had a child out of wedlock. I had no idea what it takes to face these things, nor did I understand the depth of the love of a mother for her children and what she will do to fight for them and to get their needs met. And now I have a greater appreciation for all mothers. And I hope all mothers feel welcome on this podcast. I hope you hear part of your story in here and that you feel empowered and inspired to keep going and be resilient as you raise the next resilient generation, because that's what we're doing. So if people want to work with you, where do they find you online?
So you can go to the Custody Blueprint, thecustodyblueprint.com. And then that's where you can go to find our program that we're working on. We've got our memberships, our private sessions, and that's also where you can find Pro Se Clinic if you are someone who is self-represented and cannot afford a lawyer, but still want to fight for your children.
Yes. And I used those resources a few times. It was a great way to prepare for my lawyer, even if you're thinking, oh, maybe I use everything you can get your hands on. So please go back and take notes and use all the tools we'll give you. And we'll give you some more down here. And feel free to reach out to us, to anyone you've heard on the podcast. If it resonates with you and you feel like we can help you, that's what this community is about. So thank you so much for being with me, Reneé. It's just been a pleasure. And thank you, audience, for being here. Please support, like, share, help us build this community so we can continue to give you inspiration to be resilient. All right. Take care and see you next time. Thank you for joining us today. Please don't forget to subscribe so we can share this message. We are a worldwide podcast with guests all around the world, and we want to continue to grow this community. You can find us on socials. You could also be a guest. Look for that link below if you'd be interested in being a guest on the podcast. If you know a sponsor or would like to be a sponsor, please reach out to me or Catherine as well.
sure we want you all on this journey. We want to hear your stories. We want to share your stories. We want to gain strength from each other, because together we're stronger. And to never forget the blessing of being a mother and what we're creating. We're creating the future every single day of our lives. So get on this train with us and let's do this thing, moms.
I believe in you. I believe in yourself. God bless. And we'll see you around. Take care.